Hello and welcome back to Those Astrology Girls. I'm Nicole.
I'm Keelie.
And today we're going to be talking all about elements, modes, and polarities in astrology. Now, this is part of our foundational educational series, if you want to call it that, but just kind of getting everyone up to speed so that when we talk about these topics in a more deeper way in the future, that you have all the building blocks to create your castle, if you will. And I have to say, this episode was so inspired by Keelie and I just interacting with each other, because we realized that in our own polarities, in our own missing elements, in our own missing modes in our charts, which you'll learn all about, we're like, oh, this is going to be a good episode, because what we realize is that we balance each other really well, because what I don't have in my chart, Keelie has a lot of, and what I have a lot of in my chart, Keelie doesn't have in hers. And so we're noticing this with each other, and it's been really funny. I see it so much easier in the other than I can see it in myself, but it's like looking in a mirror, because now I'm realizing, oh, yes, I do have a lot of these qualities.
It's been so interesting. People really do help you understand yourself on a deeper level, because I don't think I realized how mutable I was of an individual, which mutable is one of the modes, until Nicole calls me out all the time. And I'm like, wait, that's so funny, because just in this podcast partnership, it's just it's making us so aware of both of the ways that we both operate and how different we are. And, modes, which we'll go into, are so much about how your energy flows, the way your energy moves. And so for me, being this mutable energy, I'm kind of wishy-washy, a little bit I'll be one day this thing and another day this thing, and Nicole will call me out on it. And I'm like, oh, that's so funny. I didn't realize how much I change just in the day-to-day of how we operate this podcast.
Yeah, and to put it in perspective, I wouldn't call mutable so wishy-washy. I think it's just really adaptable energy. And I joke because Keelie is mutable, so she wants to call it that, she can. But I think it's so interesting how it's very flexible, kind of like a river, just bending around the curves of rocks and doing whatever it needs to do to go where it needs to flow. Whereas me, which you'll hear about, I'm very fixed. I have a lot of fixed energy in my chart, and fixed is exactly what it sounds like. It's kind of stubborn. It's just well, we did it this way before, so we're going to do it this way again. And not that I'm not open to innovation, but I'm following the steps that we did. And so then Keelie's like, well, we could do it this way. And I was like, oh yeah, we can. And then I'm like, a dawn, a light bulb moment turns on. You're like, I never would have did that on my own. And so partnership is really valuable in that way, guys. This is why we should not just do everything in a vacuum, because I would just be doing it the same way every single time.
Well, I think what's so funny too is I have a fair mix of both fixed and mutable. I'm missing the other mode, which is cardinal completely. But with fixed and mutable, it's so funny, because even listening to how you're talking about the two, it's almost like I am so fixed in one direction one day, and then the next day I'm very fixed on doing it the complete opposite way. It's I'm all in this way, and then all of a sudden I change directions. And so maybe that's why it's also jarring, because your fixed energy is oh yeah, okay, we're really stabilizing and going in this way, and okay, we're really focused on doing it this way. And then the next day I'm like, well, how about we just not, and maybe just do it a different way? And it's that's weird. But yeah, you're right. Maybe it's not wishy-washy. That's probably how my Virgo's criticizing myself. But it is that we're just really adaptable, which is what we're going to go into today. It's just kind of talking about what are the different ways, we talked about each of the individual signs, and, every sign has its own flavor and own quality to it. But when we really zoom out, what it is that we are describing is we're describing this blend of the sign through this lens of its element, through its mode, and through its polarity. And so when we use all these descriptors and we talk about each sign in such a descriptive way, really where that description is coming from is it's just a makeup of the element, the mode, and the polarity that we are going to be talking about today. So it's almost this zoomed out way of just kind of seeing each sign through a little bit more of a formulaic structure to it of okay, the element plus the mode plus the polarity really does equal the energetic expression at its, fullness for each sign.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to add all of this to the building blocks that we've already created with astrology, through the sign, the planet, the houses, right? And how it's all coming together in our chart, because it just adds a different layer that can really help you see things in a new way, and maybe see pieces of your signs that you were oh, this makes sense now. Like, I understand, like, oh, being the, the element of fire really adds a different flavor to this sign than I ever anticipated. And knowing that it's mutable fire gives me even more to work with. And so that adds so the whole idea that, not every Sagittarius is the same. Not every Gemini is the same. Not every Scorpio is the same. So keep in mind as you're listening to this, all these things that come together. And we're going to explain all the elements, all the modes, and the polarities and how you can work with them.
Yeah. So at the highest level, when we're looking at these three core components of a sign, the element, the mode, and the polarity of it, the element is going to help you understand how the energy manifests itself, how the energy gets expressed. So the four elements being fire, earth, air, and water. And of the 12 zodiac signs, 3 of those are going to be fire, 3 of those are going to be earth, 3 are going to be air, and 3 for water. So that's kind of what we're looking at right there, right off the bat, when we're looking at the elements, fire, earth, air, and water. Every sign is going to be one of those elements. So that's how the energy is going to manifest itself. Now, the mode, the next core component of a sign, this is the way that the energy is moving, the way that it's flowing. And the 3 modes are going to be cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Okay, so within every pairing of the elements, I think we've got 3 fire signs, Aries, Leo, and Sag. One of those is going to be the cardinal mode, one of those is going to be the fixed mode, and one of those is going to be the mutable mode. So that's why when we describe Aries from Leo, from Sagittarius, they're going to each have a different flavor of quality. They're going to have a different style. We like to think of the mode like, okay, yes, it's the way the energy moves, the way the energy flows. It really is its own unique style of fire. So when we describe each one, we're really giving it its own style, its own rhythm of that expression. And then the final component of the sign makeup is the polarity of it. And this is how the elements really interact with one another. It's their energy impulses. So the 2 polarities are yin and yang, or also feminine or masculine. And so in the context of astrology, when we talk about the masculine and the feminine energies, we're not talking about male or female. In astrology, when we're talking about the masculine, we're talking about yang energy, which means that the energy is more active, extroverted, logical, and it's associated with your left-brained hemisphere. And when we're looking at the feminine or the yin energy, well, that's more receptive, more introverted, more intuitive, and it's associated with the right-brained hemisphere. And so if you think about it, like if you have a high concentration of yang energy in your chart, that would be fire and air. And if you have a high concentration of yin energy in your chart, that's going to be earth and water.
Yeah, so using what Keelie just talked about with all of these 3 building blocks, how can you work with this while you're listening to this episode? How can you understand this in your chart? So in the show notes, we put a link so that you can run your chart and understand this and write down for each planet, what sign is it in? And then when we go through the episode, write down its element, its mode, and its polarity. And you can look at the special formula of elements, modes, and polarities and say, hey, do I have a concentration of 1 to 2 of these elements, or do you have a little bit of everything? Some people do, some people don't. I definitely do not have a dispersed chart. I have almost all water and earth energy. And then, do you have any elements that are missing completely or only 1 planet in them? It's a good thing to look at because that's going to show you where you need to pay a little bit more attention to that missing element, a term that's coined by Deborah Silverman. Keelie studied with her. She's a brilliant astrologer. She's super fun and she has great ways of explaining things. I always love her videos. And we'll deepen into this understanding, this missing element. For me, personally, I have missing air. I only have 1 placement in air, and that is my Aquarius North Node. And so that is something I am moving toward in this life and just completely absent in my chart, my missing element, if you will. And then
I'm glad to be able to bring that Aquarius to your North Node.
Bring it down for me because I'm so on the water earth path. I need some of that air.
Well, and you're bringing me fire because I only have 1 planet in fire too. And so it's just it's so interesting too, just how you bring the fire, I bring the air. It works great, you guys, because then fire and air too work really well together.
Exactly. And it's finding that match in people and understanding collaborations when you have those mix. Like, I feel like every workplace, just side note, I think every workplace should really have this as a basis of creating teams, because we would create such better teams if we knew, versus like teams I've been on before have been almost all Virgos. And I was like, oh, you guys, it's going to be okay. We're not going to make a mistake and die. We're going to have so much fun, and we're going to keep on keeping on. So little side note there. But, you know, after you look at the elements and you notice, is anything missing? Is anything going on? Look at your modes. Is there anything you have a high concentration of? Keelie shared in the beginning, she's missing cardinal. I'm missing mutable. It's interesting, and it happens. It's not unusual to be missing these modes. So take a look at those and see where is the high concentration, where are you missing some? And then finally, are you balanced in masculine and feminine, yin and yang energies, or do you have a higher concentration in only one? This is super important to understand. You know, having a balance is really nice, but being skewed one way or the other doesn't mean you can't bring the other in. And then looking at your sun, moon, and rising. Check out episode 1 if you have not already. We go all into sun, moon, and rising, but what are the elements and modes of that? Because that's going to tell you a lot. These are really important placements in your chart. And if you're only looking at just those 3, you will still get so much out of this episode. Then, if you remove the outer generational planets from the mix, you can listen to episode 10 to understand more about Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. What does that leave you with? Because as we discussed in that episode, those planets are kind of like big cohort planets. They're not changing like every couple of days like our interpersonal planets are. So the signs of these planets speak more to the qualities of the generation and not what we're working with on a day-to-day personal basis.
Yeah, you know, as we're going through, we know astrology can get super complex, and it feels like there's so many pieces. And really what we hope you guys take away from this episode today is just, you know, your ability to look at these signs kind of in a little bit more of like a different way, a little bit more of, you know, a bigger picture view of what's really going on underneath of each sign's energy. And so if you're someone who has, you know, the energy of Aries in your chart, then this is really going to support you in deepening into this understanding of Aries and why it is that you as an Aries might show up differently than some of the other fire signs, and specifically what is your fire, you know? And that's what's so interesting to think about is like your fire is going to look so different as an Aries, and kind of like the mode is almost like your special gift, like your secret sauce to showing up with this fire in the world. Same thing with an air sign. You know, if you have Aquarius and you're this like fixed air, it's helping you understand how you as an Aquarian are here to have your secret sauce. So that goes with all of the signs, and that's really is what we're deepening into today is one, understanding, you know, what it means for your element, for your big 3, right? Like really looking at that concentration in your chart and starting to understand in a deeper way how your energy gets expressed. Because yeah, we've got all these signs and it's like, cool, I can have Aries over here, I can have Scorpio over here, I can have, you know, Pisces over here. And great, like we can know all about the energies of these signs and the houses that we're in because we've done all these episodes. But like in a bigger picture, you know, how you group these signs together, it could actually tell you a really powerful story of your energy. So that's kind of like what we hope you guys can take away today is like being able to group some of these energies together to help you understand too, like how do you balance these energies, right? Because really what it's helping you understand is just the balance of your energy. Like we talked about with the missing element, like if you're missing fire from your charts, kind of like what I am. If you have 0 or 1 planets in an element or in a mode, then technically that's like a missing element or a missing mode for you. And that's really helpful for you to understand, oh, no wonder it's like, you know, hard for me to like cultivate this like fire sometimes. And or, you know, with water, maybe you're missing water. It's like, oh, no wonder maybe I struggle with like, you know, having a good cry sometimes, right? Like there's so many different ways that this can manifest. That's not to say if you don't have water, you don't know how to cry, but just this is an opportunity for you to kind of deepen into maybe where there's opportunity for you to cultivate more of like the missing element in your life, or maybe why you're not always someone who's initiating action all the time without having all this cardinal energy, or maybe why sometimes you like to change a lot because you have so much mutable energy and you're really adaptable and flexible. Again, we're going into all these, but that's really ultimately what we're hoping you guys take away from this episode today.
Yeah, for sure. Even just thinking about it, I'm like laughing. I'm like, is this why I don't like wind? I don't like wind. Well, I'm a gardener, so I think I'm like, wind in the garden is like a no-no. You're like, oh God, everything's going to blow over. It's going to be terrible. But I'm like, I'm also missing that air for my chart. I really need to bring in that air wisdom. And
now you're like, okay, wind, come at me. I accept you.
Yeah, just gently. Don't knock over my flowers, please. It's interesting when you think about those little things like that. So it doesn't have to be that deep. It can just be like, how do I feel about rain? How do I feel about the ocean? Different aspects of things can really lend so much to it. So let's dive into the 4 elements. So just how the energy is manifesting itself and gets expressed in form. How is that energy expressing itself? So 4 elements: fire, earth, air, water. There are 12 signs and 3 of each. So everyone has a balance. Like nobody is left out. Everything is balanced in astrology, which is kind of beautiful if you think about it that way. The primary properties of each element: fire is all about identity and energy. Earth is all about material, substance, and practicality. Air, mental and intellect. Water, feelings. I'd even add embodiment to that. Water is my favorite. But if you have too much or too little of an element, you may feel imbalanced at times. So like we've talked about, having that imbalance isn't a bad thing and it's totally normal, but you want to intentionally work on cultivating that so that you're not over preoccupied with one of the elements. So like me having all water and earth energy primarily can be very different, and I can feel like either overwhelmed by my emotions or like overwhelmed by needing to be grounded and practical. And so it plays both ways. So let's actually dive into fire signs here. So Aries, 1st house energy, Leo, 5th house energy, and Sagittarius, 9th house energy. So we cover all of the signs in episodes 2 and 3, and we cover all of the houses in episode 9. So if you want to familiarize yourself with that, but let's talk about the expression of fire. So fire is energy, enthusiasm, inspiration, vision. Fire signs bring energy and enthusiasm and inspiration to planets you have in those signs. It's honest, it's righteous, and it's passionate. We cannot deny fire energy. So if you have an emphasis of fire energy in your chart, you're here to inspire others with your visions. Like you're making life fun, you're making life exciting and full of energy. It really is hard to deny that fire energy. People with a high concentration of fire in their chart, I know someone who is fire, sun, moon, and rising. So they've got all 3 in their big 3, and they are just experiencing all of it all the time. They thrive on activity and expending personal energy. They're very outspoken. People might be like, hey, can you quiet down a bit? And like, that's terrible to ask a fire sign to quiet down. You can come off really intense, and it's easy for you to laugh and have fun and like find the humor in life. And like, I just love that. You can be really inspirational to others to take action. You can be the life of the party. You can fight for the underdog and love to argue and debate. Like, oh my gosh, I could so see that with a mega fire sign person. They're just like debating for the sake of debating. It's kind of fun to see. And you have a lot of energy and you're very enthusiastic and passionate. Those are those people I imagine like big fire sign energy is like turkey trot person. I already did 5 miles on the beach before everyone woke up this morning. Like, let's go. Who's going to meet me on the court for volleyball before, lunch on vacation? Like those people. And they're just like fun people. They get the crowd going. So permission slips for people with high concentrations of fire. Know when to stop. Know how to use your off button, like know how to turn it down a bit so that you can relax and you can be with yourself. Also though, let yourself shine bright and enjoy it. Don't turn down for nothing, turn down for what? It's like, no, fire signs are like, no, thank you, but be bright and don't feel bad about this brightness that you have. It's natural within you. Be open to relationships and not be closed off because you think others can't handle you. Now, that's a tough pill to swallow, but you bring this light and big energy, and often you just want others to match that energy. So don't close yourself off to finding someone who is just like that. Ignore labels that people place on you. Don't say, oh, I'm too hyper, I'm this, I'm that. It's like, no, you're here to shine bright. Let's own it. Let's be with that energy. We need this fire energy to like get things going. Be open to receiving feedback from others, be inspirational to others, and just go for it. Don't let fear stand in your way. You know you're fearless. You know it, so just go for it. And if you want some attention, ask for it. You don't have to be weird about it. And communicate to others with your heart open. All really powerful permission slips for fire signs. Even if you got a little or if you've got a lot, go forth and have fun.
Makes me wish I had more fire in my chart. I'm like, oh, it's missing element. Why?
I hope I feel that way for air too. Yeah.
And even thinking about it, with any of these, think about, if it's winter time, which as we're recording this, it's cooler outside, light a fire in your home. It really is, or light a candle in your home. Like for me, I intentionally light candles in my home just to like bring that like fiery presence into my life. Or even just like making myself like exercise. It's always like, I don't have the fiery energy to like do it in the first place, but then once I'm doing it, I'm like, oh, it feels so good in my body to cultivate this fire in my body. So there's so many ways we can work with this like fiery energy, or just even finding something that you're super passionate about. I think about that too for myself. Like anytime I'm just immersed in a passion, I'm like, yes, this is my inner fire. Even if you don't have, if fire is your missing element, there's opportunity for us to bring that into our life. It doesn't mean that we don't have fire. It just means that it's an opportunity for us to develop that in this lifetime. It's something that we came here to work towards to develop. So all about the balance, you guys, and how we can really like bring that into our life. The next element is Earth, which is the signs of Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. So Earth's expression really is practical. It's grounded. It focuses on material stability and creating in form. It brings a very practical and realistic and material oriented energy to whatever planets you have in earth signs in your chart. So earth energy really does seek to work and provide and wants to be of service and make a contribution in this world in some way. And so as someone with an emphasis of earth in your chart, if you have a lot of planets that are in earth, then you really are someone who's here to master the material world. You're here to actualize your dreams and really give form and substance to your ideas and to your creations. You're also here to fix and heal and make money to support yourself and to support others that you have in your life. So people with a high concentration of earth will oftentimes, they're going to relate to perhaps like, saving money might be really important to you, or just even handling money, working with money. Maybe you're thought by others to be really practical and grounded. Those might be keywords that people describe you as. You could be one of those cleaners when you get upset and you're like, I'm just going to clean. Like, let me just clean my entire house. Like that could be a tendency for people who have earth, is they like to clean to like help process emotions, manage their emotions, really thorough with their work. You might be someone who loves food and is really sensitive to just different tastes and smell. Earth is all about the five senses. So just thinking about your relationship with senses in this world. Perhaps you prefer to be in control. You're probably someone who's very goal-oriented. You love nature, or, consider, nature to be a necessity for you to really go out and ground. That could be something that you really love to do, is just be connected and one with Mother Earth. Also, you're really slow to change and people rely on you, and you're someone who is considered to be really dependable. So permission slips for the earth signs. It's okay for you guys to take risks, and also to remember to have fun, to not take life so seriously, to really just trust and relax and let go of any worries that you have, to maybe release that inner dialogue that's always happening around like that you're not doing enough, or maybe like, there's more for you to do, things that need to be done. Just release that, let that go. Opportunity for you guys to really lower your incredibly high standards that you place upon yourself, or maybe even others from time to time, to accept that you guys value purpose and function above fun and partying. And that's okay for you guys to be that way. To understand that less is more for you guys, truly. To let yourself slow down and to let go of any attachment that you have to results. And also, this one, so important, to celebrate your accomplishments and to not always focus on the one tiny little flaw that maybe happened that like only you would consider it a flaw. No, truly celebrate, spend time celebrating your accomplishments and your achievements.
So good. As a big concentration of earth energy, I really relate to so much of this. I was like, oh, called out again. Oh my gosh. And it's interesting, we talked about bringing fire energy into your life. Like, how can you do that? By simple acts. And I think that as someone who is so connected to the earth now, but I always haven't been, I think it's a really easy thing that we can start to cultivate in our lives to really bring that grounding energy in. Like, you don't need to go start a crazy huge garden tomorrow and grow all these things. But I mean, simple things. You could buy a houseplant, a super easy houseplant to take care of. And that brings that earth element into your home. It brings that into your own world where you're cultivating and caring for something. I mean, like Keelie said, you could put your feet on the earth outside and just enjoy that feeling and that connection of your body to the actual earth. I saw a reel on Instagram the other day. It was like, yes, nature's a necessity for me, but you're not going to find me going off of the like park trail and like camping. I'm maybe a glamping, but like closer to the hotel type of girl. So like, you know, this doesn't mean you have to like give up all the luxury comforts of life, but to be in nature, you could go for a walk down the street in your neighborhood and enjoy the trees, the birds, the sights, and the sounds, just to connect with earth. And so there's so many different things. I also think too about even just sitting on the floor. Sitting on the floor of your house brings you closer to the ground, brings you into that area. And then concentrating a bit like on the root chakra. Like, can you imagine that like tethering into the core of the earth? I think that's a really great earth-based practice that could cultivate that energy for you. And so there's so many things you could do. But if you do want to start a garden, I personally +1 that idea because that is a great way to connect. Put your hands in the soil. Enjoy it.
Okay, so moving into the element of air. So air signs are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. And the expression of air is so much about intellect, communication, social connections. They're very social signs and also ideas. Love to think, love to envision and create new ideas. Air signs bring knowledge, intellect, and bring a more relational social quality to the planets that you have in air signs. So they're going to represent the mind and your ability to speak and give a language to your thoughts. And if you're someone who has an emphasis of air in your natal chart, then you really are someone who's here to talk, write, and read. You're here to make social and intellectual connections with others and express yourself by sharing and communicating your ideas out into the world. So people who have a high concentration of air, a lot of times they might relate to someone who's very talkative, who's really like good and flows easily with words. Maybe they're quick to finish other people's sentences or, you know, speak to other people's thoughts. And they're people who love to ask questions, love to be curious, really good at observing and analyzing. I think of these people too as like the people watchers of the world. They love to observe and like really understand life in a different way. They're also people who can get bored quickly with maybe things or people and just kind of want to move on from like something pretty quick. And they are very usually easy to remember numbers and details, really good with that kind of stuff, frequently forgetting maybe where they put things. This is me to a freaking T. I'm like, this is where I feel like an airhead in life and where that like airhead gets their quality. Like my husband would laugh. I leave my purse like at pretty much at like every restaurant I go to. And I'm like, oh my God, my purse. And I'm like, okay, I've like gotten better, but I used to do it a lot.
I think you need a crossbody bag to prevent this like a restaurant thing.
I really do, you guys. So anyways, that's my whole relationship with air right there. You might relate if you have a lot of air. And then also you may be someone who gets really easily distracted by external stimulus. Also, if you guys ever notice when I'm talking, I will be mid-thought one direction and then I will completely fly and like start talking about something completely different. That's my air. My mind is going in like 100 different directions at once. Again, if you're air, you might relate to that and you might pick up on me doing that. Or actually, if you're not air, you might like be really annoyed with how often I'll be talking and I'll be like talking about one thing and then I'll like change my mind and start talking about another thing. Do you ever notice I do that, Nicole?
I do, but I don't mind it. I think like I follow it. So some of this stuff with air, I'm like, maybe I have less of the missing element than I think because I'm very talkative. I talk a lot. I'm very chatty. So, or it could just be like my Gemini best friend. Like she's a super Gemini. So I feel like we've been together forever.
Okay. So permissions list for air. It's okay for you guys to also like learn to talk from the heart and the body. You know, use your body to stay in the moment and not get lost in your own words or your own thoughts. This is like something that wow, huge permission slip. Even reading this for myself, I'm like, it is such a permission slip for us to like remember to stay in our body, because it can be so easy for us to get like lost in our words. And next thing we know, we're talking 100 miles a minute. We have no idea what we're saying. And we're like, whoa, let's come back into the body, be present with ourselves right here. Also, to seek help if you ever feel like you're struggling to make a decision. Sometimes like being stuck in the head, thinking about a bunch of different things, like such a gift of yours. But if you're really having trouble grounding a decision and like making a decision, it's okay to seek support for that, working with a coach or somebody else to help you like process your thoughts, maybe in a more linear way. If you like also don't have a lot of earth in your chart and you're like, okay, being linear with my thoughts sometimes could be a struggle. Having a journal, you guys, to work on establishing your own voice as well. Wow. When I finally started journaling, like, was it such a powerful way for me to just start to understand like my own expression and like really understand my own thoughts. And it was such a powerful outlet for me to just work with my own thoughts as well. So permission slip to journal, to find a way to express yourself that feels really good. Recognizing your own voice is medicine, you guys. It's your gift in this world. It's part of being an air sign, is like understanding the power of your own voice. Recognizing yourself as an intellectual person too, even if you're someone who always thinks you need to be like learning something new or you don't know enough yet, recognizing yourself that one of your gifts is being this intellectual person. To stop underestimating your mental capacity, to speak the negative in order to clear the air, like let out some of that chatter, unfiltered, just let it out, like let it run its course so you can get it out of your mind. Also, to find a good listener, somebody who's willing to, give you the space to just freely express yourself, again, without censoring yourself. And to also just know that you operate at a quicker pace than others a lot of times. And so it's okay for you to operate at your own pace in this way. And it's also okay to give others permission to like operate a little bit slower of a pace than you, if that's how it's going.
This was so enlightening to really hear your take on air. So thank you for this, because I didn't relate that much to air in my own life because it is my missing element. And just hearing you talk about this, I'm like, you know what, I do a pretty good job at bringing this missing element into my life and to express that way. And I was thinking, I'm like, how could we really connect with air? And I was like, blow dry your hair. No, I'm just kidding. But if that feels like, get a leaf blower. No, I'm just kidding. Leave the leaves, people. Leave the leaves. It's not necessary. But there's so many different ways that, Keelie just described as permission slips, I find to be really powerful. And so maybe connecting with that element doesn't have to do as much with the actual element itself, because air is, you can't touch it, right? Like you're touching it all the time. And so this intangibility of air brings such a different layer to this element that I find really, really fascinating. And just knowing it's always there. It is the breath of life, right? But we can't actually grab it and hold on to it. You can't get a jar full of air. And so just really working with that intangibility, I think, will bring a lot of clarity to those who have a lot of air in their chart, or they need to introduce air into their chart. So
breath work.
Yeah, breath work. I was going to ask you actually when you were talking about fire, and I was like, so would people who have a lacking of air and fire, would they really benefit from like breath of fire? I don't really know much about breath work.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably why I love that practice too. Actually, I love the breathwork practices that are really activating, because I actually think it's my way of like using my breath to bring more fire like that into just my energy body.
That's interesting, because I really like the steady, I don't know what you call it. I forget what you call it. It's a very fancy name. The like count to 5 breathing and then hold and then count to 5 and then breathe again. Like that one really brings me a lot of ease when I'm kind of overthinking, or just like my mind's racing, or I'm thinking, like you said, in the earth context of that one thing I did wrong. Over time, I'm like, okay, let me just breathe in for 5, hold for 5, exhale for 5, and then hold for 5 again. And then I'm like, okay, all is well in the world. I'm like, imagine that. It's probably why I don't love breath work, because I have a little bit of air energy.
You're like annoyed by it, but at the same time you're like, oh, but it feels so good when you like probably finish doing it. Same with like me. It's like, actually doing the thing like to actually make yourself do it. It's like, oh, but then it feels good to bring that balance.
Yeah, I'd much rather lift heavy weights for 30 minutes than breathe.
Great.
You're like, can't relate.
I know. It's getting myself to actually do the thing. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, it's all relative, and we can all introduce more of it and like balance over time. But our final element that we're going to talk about is water. Now, like I said, I'm a very watery person. I've got a ton of Scorpio energy in my life, and water signs are Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, the trifecta. Water expresses itself as emotional depth, intuition, and connection. Water signs bring a depth of feeling and emotion to whatever planets occupy these signs. So, it is also the element of meditation, stillness, and purity of love. With an emphasis of water in your chart, you're highly connected to the emotional body and express yourself with deep compassion and intuitive awareness. You can be a natural healer, and you have your hands on your heart. It's a really beautiful expression of water energy. People with high concentrations of water will probably relate to some of these, maybe not all of them. As I was looking into it, I was like, well, I don't really cry easily, but, crying easily is really a nice thing to have if you're an actor. That could be really great. But crying easily and being sentimental can go hand in hand. So you might not feel overly emotional with your water concentrations, but being sentimental definitely rings true for me. You can easily shut down when you're upset. You're prone to negative self-talk. You are definitely more private. You're like, behind closed doors, no, I'm not going to share what's going on here. Water signs are really into mysticism, love music, big worriers about our loved ones, second guessing ourselves sometimes, and you can get immediate gut responses to people. I definitely have since I was a child, and my mom was always like in the car, like, okay, like you can tell me, but like don't tell everyone. Because I definitely said some things as a child that were like, oh my gosh, people are like, what does she mean? And I was usually right, but it scares some people when that water intuition just hits perfectly. Permission slips for you. So it's okay to allow yourself to feel and listen deeply, to cry, to get angry, to release feelings in the moment. I joke with my husband all the time. He's like, he thinks it's my fire energy that does this, but I think it's the water in me that when I feel something, like I will not wait to express what's going on. I would just be like, I feel this and I feel this and this upset me and blah, blah, blah. And then like within 5 minutes, I'm fine. I'm like, okay, good, we're done. Whereas like sometimes he holds things in a bit more. He doesn't have as much water energy as I do. And he's like, oh, 2 weeks ago, I was annoyed by this thing. And I was like, 2 weeks? How did you let that simmer for that long? So we let it out. It's really important for us to open up to those that we love. So that privacy aspect of things, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to let other people that are in that inner circle, like really know how we feel. It's okay to spend time alone, to have guilt-free time to read, watch TV, meditate, take a naps, anything else that you consider to be downtime. AKA, it does not have to be productive. And it's okay to only want to be around your people and not around anything that feels superficial. I so relate to this because sometimes you just don't want to do all of that, and it's okay. And to stay with yourself so you can remain aware of your tendencies to please and shapeshift and take on the qualities of whoever you're with. It can be really easy, and it can be a really great quality to be able to do this, right? Being a chameleon gets us so far in life, but being able to know, oh, this is who I truly am internally, intrinsically, is the best gift you will ever give to yourself. And so use that power, but also come back to you.
Yeah, I think one of the best ways that I think about cultivating more water, in your life and bringing that into balance is like baths, taking a good bath, which I actually hate baths. And I say that and I'm like, I hate baths because you sit in a bath and like you don't do anything. And my Virgo wants to be busy. My Aquarius does not want to feel in my body and like slow down. It wants to like think and learn and intellectualize things. And that's actually like one of the things, it's so interesting having, a high concentration of water in my chart and also a high concentration of air and Aquarius energy specifically, because Aquarius energy doesn't always want to be in the body. It wants to intellectualize things and kind of, stay kind of a bit on the surface, where like the water really asks you to drop into your feeling body and your emotional body and like really feel into how it is that you're feeling. And so, just even thinking, I've got water in my chart, yet my relationship with water in my life has been very interesting. And it's actually, while fire might be one of my missing elements, it's funny because when I was in astrology school, we went through this whole practice of Deborah Silverman's astrology school, and she had us identify our missing element through questions. And fire actually wasn't my missing element. It was actually water, which you would not think when you're looking at my chart. And so even though my chart might say I've got a lot of water, I actually was shut off from my water. And so there have been a lot of ways that I've really worked with my water I tell you what, learning how to cry and giving myself permission to cry was like one of my biggest parts of like starting to embrace my water and like my sensitive side, because that was a part of me that was shut down for a long time. And yeah, I still need to find a way to take more baths. I think that would help.
Honestly, when you said like learning how to cry, I was like, yay, like I'm so glad, like, because that is really hard for people to like feel that emotion in that way and to allow yourself to truly express like tears and energy into those feelings. That can be really jarring for someone who doesn't do that or feels maybe it's wrong, or maybe you were told as a kid not to cry, not necessarily you, but anyone, like, oh, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. When I hear parents say that to like children, I'm like, oh gosh, you're really planting the wrong seeds here, like not good. But the fact that you don't like the bath is so funny. Because like if there is anywhere that you would find, like if I could work fully in the pool, I would. And I've tried before. It gets a little dicey with the Wi-Fi, but like I will voice memo clients from the pool. I will do Instagram stories from the pool. Like I am a water person. There's nothing that brings me more joy than being in the pool staring at my garden. Oh my gosh, it's the best day ever, all the time on repeat. And I designed my life like this for a reason. But maybe you just need a pool. That's probably the key, Keelie. Baths are one thing.
I did have a pool at one point and I hardly used it. And I'm like, what is my problem? I'll be at the ocean and there will be days I don't actually go in the ocean. I just will dip in to fresh off and then come back. Because
oh my gosh,
I know, it's so interesting. So I actually have to like make myself like just go sit in the ocean. Like, wow, it feels so good. Like the last time I was at the ocean last year, I like actually intentionally went out in the ocean. I'm like, I have so much water in my chart. Like I need to just like sit in this water and really like cultivate this like Pisces, because specifically I have Pisces in my chart. A Pisces moon and Venus. I'm like, let me cultivate this Pisces energy and just bask in the ocean and the water.
Oh my gosh, you need to go scuba diving as a Pisces. I'm just kidding. That could be really deep. That could get really, I don't know how you're like, okay, enough, get me back on the boat.
I feel like that's more Scorpio, like go deep, deep, deep.
I know, it's so true. I just can imagine you're like, yeah, I just lay on the beach in the sun. I'm just like,
I'm cultivating my fire. Like, let me just cultivate the heat.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many ways that we could look at that, but that's so funny. My mom was a Leo and she was always like, yeah, I'll sit by the pool. I will sit by the pool and watch you. And I was just like, watch my handstand, watch my jump, do. Like since the moment I could swim, I was in the pool. So I work with that energy. I hope my kids are as water focused as I am, because we're going to spend a lot of time by the pool. And if they're on the pool deck, that's fine, but they're going to have to be one with the water. Oh my gosh. Well, we're going to move into the modes now. We've covered all of the elements and we've covered them deeply. So we hope you can feel yourself in each of these or understand which one of those elements is kind of missing in your chart, whether it is actually missing in your chart or how Keelie just described. It was like missing in energy. Like you just actually don't relate to this energy enough and maybe you want to bring it in. So let's talk about how energy manifests as movement. And so something I like to talk about with the 3 modes is think of a season of the year. So whether it's spring, summer, winter, fall, every season has these modes in them. So we're going to move from cardinal to fixed to mutable. And if we think of let's think of spring, for instance. So we start with Aries season in late March. And it's initiatory energy. It's brand new. We're like, oh my gosh, we're in a new season. It's spring. It might still be a little cold, but we know we are on our way to this brand new gate opening into a new season. It is springtime. And then we move into Taurus season. Taurus season, you're like, okay, it's not, we can't really deny that it's spring. It's pretty obviously spring from a climate perspective. We're in the middle. We know that we're at least in the middle of spring. Like it's not yet summer. We know we're not barreling ahead towards summer, but we're pretty steady in the middle. And then if we look at the final season of spring, Gemini season, we're like, is it spring? Is it summer? I don't know. It could be both. Like we're moving in between. Like we could be both. That's that mutable energy. So I love using seasons to describe this because every season has cardinal, fixed, and mutable energy without fail. It always repeats in that order. And it's a quick way to understand, oh, that is how the energy moves throughout the year 4 different times. So I hope that helps to understand these signs, but we're going to dive into cardinal, fixed, and mutable, what signs are associated with them, and how that actually moves throughout the year.
So starting off with cardinal signs. So cardinal signs are going to be Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. And cardinal energy, these are your initiators, your directors, your action takers out in the world. And cardinal signs, they really initiate and generate energy. They're here to be starters. They're self-assertive, quick to take action, and have a lot of high ambition. They are the originators, you guys, who really get things started with a very active, direct, and purpose-led energy. Now, some of the shadows of these cardinal signs might be starting things without finishing. Great at starting things, but are they good at finishing them? Maybe being a bit impatient. Maybe overcommitting yourself, starting a bunch of different things because you're really excited about it all. And also maybe a tendency to just show up in a bit more of like a forceful energy, right? Going too much, too fast, too soon, perhaps. Nicole, I know you have a lot of cardinal energy in your chart, right? I have like a very little cardinal energy. So even just like speaking from like a high level about cardinal energy, how do you resonate with some of the ways that I just described the cardinal energy? And you know, so what are some of the ways that that shows up for you?
It makes a lot of sense, honestly. Like when something new comes around, I'm like, yes, I'll do it. Or like I'll sign up, and then like my calendar's so full and I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, like I maybe I bit off more than I could chew. But then like, you know, I still persevere through it because I don't want to admit that, you know, that cardinal energy is like, no, I'm good, I got this too, you know. And totally starting things but not wanting to finish them is huge. Like I used to work in an industry where I worked on mega projects. And so the beginning of the project, everything's so good, everything's so organized. You might even think I was a Virgo rising, but I'm not. And then toward the end, I'm like, oh God, who wants to update that spreadsheet? Not me, not me at all. But I'm like so happy for it to be done. And so that energy feels like very initiator. Like we can get things started, get things going, but we need to have collaborators to pass the torch on to, especially with heavy cardinal and even fixed energy. It's just kind of like, the sticking power isn't always there toward the very bitter end. I think cardinal energy is really fun energy because like I always think about it in the climate sense, and I do think of those 4 signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, as being just really, really important, powerful signs to like bring in the new. But following them right on their heels are fixed signs. So we've got Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. Now, fixed sign friends, we are very concentrated, stable, consistent, focused, persistent, steadfast, and determined. So our fixed planets are reservoirs of good energy and power. They're the staying power that cardinal energy really needs to keep on keeping on. They want to stay the course and they want to stay focused, but they have the power and the energy to help do that. They can finish what cardinal energy started. So thank goodness I had a little bit of both that kept me going, or else I probably would have been unemployed many, many moons ago. But, you know, the shadows of the fixed signs, sometimes we can be a bit stubborn. We can be a little rigid, resistant to change, staying stuck and obsessing over something. And like, that's in an unhealthy way. So I know like a lot of people with heavy fixed sign energy talk about rumination. Like they're always ruminating in their head. Like, what if? And it's like, sometimes we just gotta let go, you know, we gotta let go to that. And so that shadow is totally something to recognize, and it's okay. We can work with it.
I always think about Aquarius as one of the fixed signs, obviously, as you said. And it's so funny because growing up, my favorite word was always no. Somebody asked me to do something, I'm like, no. And it wasn't that I didn't want to do it. It was that I didn't want somebody else to tell me to do it. So it always had to be no. Like I was stubborn. Like, you're not going to tell me what to do. And as soon as they were like, okay, fine, it's fine, you don't want to do it, then I'm like, okay, but I'll do it anyways just because I want to do it, not because you told me to do it.
That is so funny because I just like, I'm shocked by this because my husband Mark's favorite word is no. Yeah. He always says no to everything. You could ask him like, do you want to go like bowling? And he'd be like, no. But then he's like, oh, actually, yeah, I do. Well,
wait, what's kind of, does he have fixed energy in his shirt?
Yeah, he does. Yeah. He's got a lot of Scorpio, but it's just kind of funny to hear someone else say that I'm like, oh, maybe that is like a fixed energy thing. I thought he was just being like funny.
I think it's like somebody tells me to do something, like to change things up or whatever. It's like, no. But then my mutable is like, okay, but maybe I will just because I want to, not because you tell me.
It was my idea.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So moving into the final mode of mutable energy. So the mutable signs are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. Mutable energy is very adaptable to change, They're flexible, versatile, also really connected in a really relational way. They're very easygoing typically and free-flowing signs. And mutable planets that you have in your chart, they're going to be highly adaptable energies for you and can really easily shift and evolve with the changing circumstances. So if you think about it, cardinal signs are the ones that are getting things started. Fixed signs are the ones with that staying power to see it through, to finish it, to get to the end of the finish line. And then mutable energy are when things start to become a bit stale. Maybe things have stayed a bit too fixed and start to get a bit of, feeling old and stale. Well, mutable energy really comes in to shake things up, to say, okay, things are feeling old here. Like, let's change courses. Let's change paths. Here's how we need to grow. Here's how we need to adapt to whatever changing circumstances are coming our way. Sometimes we're on a path and then things get shaken up around you. And it's like, we need the mutable signs to be able to help us adapt to what's changing and to really continue to change courses as needed. So some of the shadows of the mutable signs could be maybe being a bit scattered, being unfocused, getting distracted easily, being indecisive in decision makings, like changing their minds a lot about things. It could be that wishy-washy energy we talked about, being restless, and also being a bit prone to worrying a lot of times.
Yeah, I find this energy so fascinating. I can't believe I don't have any of it, but I think I'm pretty adaptable until I'm not. That fixed and cardinal energy comes online. It's like, no, just forget it. But, mutable energy is a gift. If we didn't have people who are adaptable in the world, imagine how rich everything would be. Like, I just cannot imagine it. So it brings such a great balance to things.
So I think just kind of bringing this all together with what we've talked about at this point, we've got the elements and we've got the modes, and just kind of start to think about, like, for your specific energies, for the signs that you have in your chart, think about, okay, what is their element plus what is their mode? Bring those two things together to get a deeper understanding of how that shows up for you in your life. So for Nicole, for example, she's got her moon in Aries. So that's understanding, her moon being her emotional self, right? Being in Aries, it's understanding, okay, her moon's going to show up in a really fiery way and in a very cardinal way. That fire plus cardinal equals Aries. So do that for all of the signs that you have in your chart and then relate them back to the planet. We've done an episode on the planet already. That's in episode 10. And so you can think about how that part of you specifically shows up through the element of the sign and through the mode of that sign as well.
Yeah, totally. And hearing that just makes so much sense with the Aries information. And even just thinking of your moon in Pisces, being mutable in water and how much, that reflects on the emotional world of you. It gives you a different way to look at it because that mutable energy is really free flowing and adaptable. And so learning to work with that plus the emotional nature of your moon and just the emotional nature of water really adds a lot of depth and interesting facts for you to work with there. So as Keelie mentioned in the beginning, we talked about polarities and how we have yin and yang energy, and that's also known as feminine or masculine energy. And so, yang energy is really active, extroverted, logical. It's really associated with the left brain hemisphere. And so if you're looking at your elements in your chart and you have a high concentration of fire and air, then you have a high concentration of yang energy. And in astrology, feminine or yin means that the energy is more receptive, introverted, intuitive, and associated with the right brain. So if you have a high concentration of earth and water in your chart, then you have a high concentration of yin energy. So look at that. What is the balance looking like for you? Is it a lot of yin? Is it a lot of yang? Feminine, masculine? And like we said at the start, this is not just female, male energy. This is different energy. This is masculine and feminine. So, how can you understand how the elements interact with each other? So fire and air, they have yang properties. They're masculine energy. How do the elements best interact with each other? So if we think about fire and air, they have yang properties. So what element feeds the flame of fire and is necessary for fire to continue? Without it, the fire would burn out. It's air. So air is needed. Air needs fire in the chart. And so energizing the combination of the two brings them together. It makes them really compatible energies. As Keelie said before, like, I've got fire, she's got air, together we're like, boom, we've got a fire. And that is Those Astrology Girls, this podcast going. But then if we think about like water and earth, both yin properties. So if you plant a seed in the ground, seeds do not germinate without what? they need water. They need water to grow. And that really shows the balance of how water and earth work together. So if you need to work with the different energies or like something that's missing, think about this. There's an elemental imbalance. So if you need to ground, because you have too much air, you need to go from being up here in the sky to like down to earth. Makes sense. You've heard people say like, oh, they're so down to earth, or like, oh, they're like, you know, in the clouds, like mind in the clouds. Like think about those, you know, colloquial sayings when we think about how we can balance those energies. And then sometimes we need to, like, someone says like, you know, you need to light a fire under them. Yeah, because sometimes they probably are lacking that inspiration or that action that fire often brings.
Yeah, there's so many ways that, you know, in our very first episode, when we talked about the sun, the moon, and the rising, we invited you guys to think about the elements that each of your sun, moon, and rising were in. And, you know, for me personally, I talked about this with my Aquarian air energy and, you know, kind of having this tendency to live up in my mind. But then I've got this watery moon, which is asking me to feel and drop into my body. It's understanding that I have these two pieces in my chart. And maybe sometimes they don't always work together, but it helps us start to understand, like, okay, you know, how can I work with these two pieces? And yeah, I can be up in my mind when I'm working on this thing, but then I can also drop into my body, you know, in other areas of my life. And I was thinking about you, Nicole, you know, in your sun, moon, and your rising, you've got 2 water signs and a fire sign, right? And so when you think about fire plus water and water putting out the fire, right? Like the two don't always stay lit together. So I'm curious for you, you know, how do you kind of manage, you know, the fire and the water aspects in your sun, moon, and your rising? And do you ever find that like your water puts out your fire or that your fire overpowers your water?
Yeah, all the time. The fire definitely puts out the water far more than, you know, the opposite. I feel like most of the time I'm so busy sensing, feeling, doing, intuiting that I can't start something, or it's the complete opposite where I'm like, I'm just gonna go and like forget whatever's happening around me. I don't need to feel, I don't need to think. And that's how I got burnout, honestly, in corporate. Like I just was like, no, I'm keep initiating, I keep going very strongly, and that ended up causing such an imbalance. And then it took me years to just tap into that water deeply, really get back in touch with my intuition and all of my feeling needs. And then for those years, it was kind of hard to start because I was so sensing and so in my feels. And now I finally struck a balance because I'm like, okay, it can be both. I can feel in the morning and go in the afternoon, and it can be all of it. And so it was a really interesting life to like live all in that fire without any regard for the water.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, you guys. And, you know, when I think too, when we're talking about the yin and the yang energies, this is also a way for you to understand, you know, as Nicole said, we've got fire and we've got air coming together to create those astrology girls, right? And so it's also understanding too, maybe how you relate with other people. Like my husband is a fire sun sign and I'm an air sun sign. It's like understanding the way that we can really fuel each other. And at the same time, like, boy, if it's going in like the wrong direction of a conversation, can it get really loud really fast, right? And so it's like understanding, you know, how these energies work together and can really help you understand like how you relate to other people too, like who are the same sun sign or different sun sign. And that's not to say you're not compatible with, you know, a water sun, you know, that I wouldn't be compatible with a water sun sign. Like I've also got a ton of water in my chart, so I can relate to them in different ways. So we all can relate to people in different ways. It's just like different aspects of ourselves are going to like connect to different people in different ways.
Yeah, it's so fascinating when we look at the makeup of other people and how we interact with them because it can tell us so much more about ourselves. Like we talked about in the beginning with our partnership, like noticing the fixed and the mutable energy differences that we have has shown us so much about the way we work. And it actually is so helpful because I think like the way Keelie works as a very mutable person and fixed energy as well, it's actually really helpful and it brings a different perspective to things and it shows that we can change and pivot and adapt. And then me with the staying power and the initiatory power of Cardinal and fixed energy, just like it brings a different energy to things. Like I'm like gonna, you know, have a lot of starting and going power, but adapting isn't necessarily my forte. And so it brings that great balance. And I think that that's what makes a really good partnership, a friendship, a collaborative, you know, endeavor. And so keep that in mind. Even like ask your friends and see what your friend group is like. And that way you can know more about like, who are you naturally attracting? Who do you like to be around? But, we've got a lot of episodes now, Those Astrology Girls, like, woo, celebrating us. We've got episodes 2 and 3 all about the 12 signs of the zodiac. And so it's a deeper dive into each sign's characteristics and how they express in the world. Episode 9, we talk about the 12 houses in astrology. And so context, this will give you a lot of context for where in your life these energies are showing up. And then also we have episode 10, which talks about all the planets and how the planets influence the expression of these elements and these modes. So when you start to put it all together, you're starting to make a really, really cool foundation for so much astrological knowledge in your life. And just like Keelie and I have explored today, like every time we do a deep dive in these episodes, both of us have gone to astrology school. We've done all of the work for so many years. We're always learning and we're always seeing it from different angles. So no pressure to know this all overnight, and just have fun with it and explore what's really piquing your interest at any time.
And there's one pro tip that I want to give you guys, and that's not to overcomplicate things and give you guys so much more to talk about. But I do think that there is something important to speak to here. And it's just also remembering, which again, we talked about the houses in episode 9. It's remembering that each house in your chart also is related to a specific sign's energy, which means that each house also has like an overarching elemental quality to it. So you're going to have fire houses for the houses that relate to Aries, Leo, and Sag. Same with like your earth houses, your air houses, and your water houses. So go back and listen to that episode if you haven't already, just to get a little bit more flavor. And again, that's the way that I want you to think about this is really, I only want you to kind of think about this right now. If you're a beginner, I only want you to think about this as if you have like a high concentration of planets in a specific house. Because for example, let's say you have like 7 planets in Capricorn, and like on paper, that's telling you you're this huge earthy person. But let's say all of those planets in Capricorn are in the 4th house of Cancer, right? That tells you a lot about some additional qualities of those planets showing up in this major water house of Cancer, right? And so I wanted to say that because while yes, you might have a high concentration of planets in Earth, and maybe you don't have any other planets in a water sign. So you're like, oh, I'm missing water. But gosh, I really relate to like the water sign. And actually, like maybe I don't always feel like such a Capricorn, but I do feel like this emotional, watery person and really sensitive and connected and, whatever, because you've got all these planets in the 4th house of Cancer. Now, for me, I probably wouldn't pay too much attention to this like right in the beginning because I've got so many planets in so many different houses. Really, like what I would focus on is exactly what we talked about today. But if you are someone who has a huge concentration of planets in a specific house, I think it would be really informative for you to also look into the elemental qualities of that specific house just to see how that element also affects all of those parts of you.
Yeah, it's a great pro tip because just thinking of my own chart, I've got concentrations of planets in the 12th, 1st, 2nd, and 8th. Easy. They're all earth and water.
There you go.
And fire, earth, water, and fire. And that air, like we said again, missing element. It's no surprise. So it is really a great pro tip to look at, especially if you have concentrations of planets in your chart, which are known as stelliums for those who know. And that's I love stelliums. I think they're really cool topic and expression of energy. But we've covered so much in this episode of elements, modes, polarities, and we hope that this brings you a new lens on even more things for your own chart, for your own life, and for those around you. As always, we'll be back next Monday with a new episode, and we love so many of you sharing our episodes, telling us what takeaways you've had, sharing it with friends. We so appreciate you, and if you even want to support us more, you can rate and review the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And until next week, we will see you then.
Bye.